David Greenstein, welcome back to Mint. How are you doing, man? Thank you for being on again.
Yeah, my first time doing a repeat episode, so I figured there's no better place than Mint.
Let's go. I agree with you. There is no better place than Mint. David, I think a good place to start because you've already been on. So if you don't know who David is, go listen to the last episode. But I want to understand, what is the current state of music NFTs from your perspective?
Yeah, so I think the main thing is that there's been no stoppage. Obviously, we're in the middle of like somewhat of a bear market, but there's been no stoppage of on the artist side of artists releasing music. In fact, like we're seeing, like for us, like all time releases on Sound, and we even did 11 drops in one day this past previous week, which used to be that we did 11 drops in like almost a month or like 15 days. So I think the one thing that's been really, really inspirational is seeing all the artists continue to release music, because so much of what's been going on is not tied to any type of bull or bear market. It's really about releasing in music in a fun, creative, and like autonomous way, which transcends a lot of the kind of market conditions of Web3, and I think is something that really excites me. So I think, to be honest, like the state of music NFTs is extremely healthy, from the perspective of like there's people still collecting every single day on the Sound site, and there's more artists than ever that want to release and create music NFTs, which is something that has been incredibly inspiring, not just to me but the entire Sound team.
And, and what season are we on right now for Sound? Is it season 4, season 5?
We're on season 4. I wonder
Okay.
how many seasons we'll go, but we're obviously like we just launched season 4, and really like the main kind of change there is we started to one of the things that has stopped Sound from growing a little bit faster is we did a Twitter space for every single new artist on Sound, because one of the things that we wanted to do is really highlight every single story of these artists, and really tell the stories of like why they were joining Sound and why they were putting out that song that day. And so, as somebody who does obviously a podcast every day, these Twitter spaces are usually 30 minutes to an hour.
Right.
And so every single day, we've probably done several hundred of them at this point. I stopped counting a long time ago. But basically we made the decision to like not do a Twitter space for every single new artist, which has had the benefit of being able to slowly start to onboard more artists, which has been incredible. And that's obviously like how we're able to get more artists on Sound. And this kind of sets the stage for the conversation today. But one thing we've been consistent about since the day we launched is that Sound has always been designed and, intention to basically be as open to as many people as possible. Because the tools of music NFTs are for any artist. It's not just for as like a selection of artists. And so
Right.
the first major step towards that was basically the protocol, which is there's kind of two parts to Sound getting open. One is access to the contracts and the same smart contracts that power Sound, and we kind of revamped them, which we can get into on the for this like protocol release. And then the second is like the UI and the front end of being on the Sound website. And that one is even more nuanced, because of how do you discover all the songs if there's thousands being uploaded per day? How do you how do you deal with like content moderation if somebody uploads a song illegally that isn't theirs? So really just being extremely thoughtful around that, so that the goal of obviously is to find set of ears for every single song, and we want to make sure that we're able to deliver on that promise. So the
Yeah.
first step in that direction was really getting these new contracts open, so that everyone has the same tools to release and create music NFTs in a really gas efficient, fun way.
Last time you were on, we recorded the episode during season 2. So 2 seasons have passed. You announced the Sound protocol. Honestly, a very monumental update in the world of music NFTs. I'm curious, what have been some of your learning lessons from season 2 since the last time you were on to now?
Yeah, so I think there's like a couple main reasons why we like revamp the contracts and kind of move towards the protocol. One is like we started to move towards like the song as like the atomic unit for music NFTs, and so we wanted every single song to be its own contract and therefore its own collection. That was a way that we were able to get end-to-end secondary royalties across primary and secondary sales. It was also like artists today. We originally started with like artist contracts, but artists themselves are not contracts. Songs are typically the contract. And so it made sense for us to focus on kind of the song as the kind of base unit. we also like saw a lot of like, people obviously talking about metadata and different mint formats, and it was really hard to like predict like what are all the like options that people are going to want. And so we really crafted the protocol in like a pretty modular way so that each of these components, whether it's like a minting module or a metadata module or a payments module, can all be configurable to support different use cases based on the artist's needs. And it's all permissionless at the base layer. So if you want to like not use the sound metadata module and plug in your own metadata module, you don't need to ask for permission to do that. And so really like we think like these contracts are going to become the standard for kind of music NFTs because of how gas efficient they are and because of how like configurable they are. And that's kind of reflected in kind of what's been going on with kind of the early usage today. So right. I think like last I was on an upload, which was like last week, to deploy a song contract was about like $7 on ETH layer 1, which obviously takes into account like gas fees today, but that's pretty good starting point. So something I've been excited about.
I would agree as well, and I think with the introduction of a protocol specifically for music, I guess there's a vision of what could be built on top of the protocol, and I'm curious from your perspective, what are some applications, use cases, ideas that you would love to see the community experiment with and sort of implement on Sound's protocol?
Yeah, so I think the main thing is like something we've always said is like, what are the things that you can build uniquely today that like things like Spotify haven't been able to build before? And I think there's always, the first thing that was really obvious is that there's always been this tension between artists and, somewhat listeners. Because from a listener perspective, a lot of people like going to one place to discover and find out new music because there's a single destination for discovery. But artists oftentimes want to do custom websites or custom drops or have their own brand. And that's really hard to build tooling that supports all those, custom drops and experiences because you just can't think of all the possibilities. And that's also part of the fun of this. And also from a more like a collector perspective, it might be more like intimate to purchase on an artist website because it feels like you're purchasing directly from them. But if you don't even know about an artist in the first place, then there's obviously a lot of value because of the buyers that are coming to Sound every single day to just go to discover new people. So how do you help an artist like really engage their existing audience, but also how do you help artists like continue to grow their audience? And right now it kind of feels like you have to choose. And so the first initial use case was basically to like let artists do drops on their own website, which was kind of a trend that we saw kind of happening. And artists want to have their own brand, their own control. And so we launched the protocol with like Rio Cragen in partnership with Bonfire, who I know has been on the podcast as well. And basically Rio did an album drop on his own website, own domain, but then it also existed on Sound before and after the drop for like playback purposes. And so that's something that I think has been really, really inspirational. It kicked off a slew of them with like Daniel Allen doing a remix album. Connie Digital did the same thing. Aman, who obviously works at Sound, did an incredible job for her song Surrender on Bonfire as well. So that's been like one of the like clear use cases so far. And then there's a few more of the music NFT applications that are starting to build on top of Sound as well. In terms of like doing other like forking like or doing a different mint experience that exists on Sound, but then having the audio live on Sound afterwards. And then one of the things obviously that I think will be happening are like what are the other types of like audio minting that can be done that isn't necessarily on Sound today. So I think for people looking to do audio smart contract creation, I think these contracts are the most cutting edge for obviously being able to mint music NFTs, but I think applies to more audio or any form of audio NFT more broadly.
Let's I want to do an hypothesis, or not a hypothesis, a hypothetical situation, okay, for a minute. Imagine Spotify or Apple Music were to release or had released a protocol, like let's say 10 years ago for the music industry. What do you think the music industry would look and feel like today?
Yeah, I think you'd see a much more multi-client world where there's so many other ways to discover and support music outside of the main, Spotify application. And I think that's kind of like the opportunity set that kind of exists today is like, it's very, very hard. In fact, I can't really name one. I don't know if you can, but like about one third-party application that's built on top of Spotify or Apple Music that actually has scale and traction. And I think that's like more of like, like by design than anything else.
Hmm.
So to me, it's like they've never really encouraged third party developers to basically build on top of a Spotify or an Apple Music, because you either get rate limited or you're not able to, or you're at the mercy of them cutting you off at any single time.
Right.
And I think that's something that I think has been really, really inspirational and cool, is like people don't need to ask for permission to start building on top of sound or the contracts. And I think, it would lead to a world where, like, what if artists could have their own kind of streaming platform on their own website? What if there could be other clients that like focus specifically on a certain genre of music or on a specific particular type of artist at an earlier stage? You might be able to build these types of, applications. And then the cool part is that it all kind of ties together. Like, maybe a stream on one affects a stream on another. Like, they're all kind of interconnected. It's still aggregating, like streaming is streaming. And so that to me is like kind of a missed opportunity today, because you're basically required to get all, like, they've aggregated the eyeballs, which is super powerful, but it comes at the expense of kind of the creativity. There's only one experience for streaming today, which is what I think, I think the kind of like Web3 mindset is like, there's already, Spinamp, Future Tape, and Ooh La La, of three of the predominant, music streaming, they didn't like really ask for permission. They started building on top of sound, which is really, really cool and exciting to see. And so you just build this like richer ecosystem. And I think that's the thing to take away, is like, I wouldn't say like the Web3 music space is like that old. It's pretty
Right.
early. But what encourages, me is like just seeing how many experiments are being run is something that I think is like pretty cool as like a music, I've always been like obsessed with kind of the intersection of music and technology. And for so long, it hasn't been exactly the space that you'd want to build in. And so to see this many experiments from like, things like Heads or Arpeggi or Songcamp, and, obviously like the marketplaces like Sound and Catalog, and Zora and everything, it's been pretty like fascinating to see, because it's like, there's so much like, there's so much just like incredible collaboration and so much, at the end of the day, so much incredible music, that it really does feel like we're just getting started, which is,
Right.
always
You
what I
love
say.
saying that. You love tweeting that. We're just getting started. I think
Well,
where we are in music NFTs today is it feels a lot like, it really feels like there's a huge energy around, of course, collecting and curation, but I feel like we're still missing the component of listenership, right? Like a lot of these platforms, whether it be Sound or like other sort of like creator based collecting platforms or like Glass, right? They don't really highlight the viewer count. They highlight more of like the collecting, right? The collecting experience around it. Is that sort of like the intention and the vision we're building towards? Is the goal behind Web3 music to build more of like a collector based environment around music? Or do you think it's more so to highlight the listenership, the viewership, and all these other sort of components that maybe Web2 has done really well, for example?
yeah, so I think it's a really good question, and I think it has a bit of nuance there, which is like the reason why like a lot of places have left out the views is that like artists are like coming out of an experience with like something like Spotify, where like everything is about how many plays did you get. And I think the like part of the notion of like the Web3 music space was about challenging that the number of streams is correlated with like to how like impactful or how much emotional value that song creates, because you have artists that don't necessarily have the highest number of stream counts that can sell out huge tours, and you have other artists that have huge stream counts that can't sell out a 200 cap venue. And so it kind of puts the challenge like and flips it a little bit on its head and saying like, hey, like let's focus on like active relationships. So let's focus on the people that actually care about the music and really value the artist and their craft, and really like reward and celebrate those people, and kind of like distance ourselves a little bit from like the people that are more passively consuming music. Not that there's anything wrong with that, which we'll get to in a second, but that's kind of what's already valued today based on like the Spotify ecosystem. So I think it was more of a feature than a bug to kind of not include that information. But I don't think play counts are a inherently, bad thing, in the sense that like, artists obviously want to have their music heard by as many people as possible. I think that it's the more the corollary that's true, which is, just because a song doesn't have that many streams does not mean that that song isn't incredibly impactful. And I think in order to like understand this whole music NFT landscape, you kind of have to understand the history of music and the internet. And that kind of starts with Napster, which is obviously, my profile photo avatar on Twitter. But Napster, and also my spirit animal, but also like the Napster, logo, sorry, the Napster, product, kind of showed that like people want to listen to music for free. Like the average music listener wants to listen to music for free. And I talked about this, in the famous debate with Kobe, but the music industry was like, we're not going to let you monetize music for free because that's just not the way it's going to work over here. So Napster ultimately gets shut down as an illegal business. And then iTunes kind of pops up, and iTunes actually, did have something that I find quite interesting, which is like, it has a really active relationship between like, a purchaser and an artist, because you're not like running around accidentally purchasing things. And so in that regards, like, I think it was, much more stronger connection between like you and the music. And I also think it's very akin to like CD and evolution of like vinyl and, some of the more active forms of music consumption. The problem was the average music, like listener doesn't want to spend like that much money on music per year, which was kind of proven out. And they were also used to like kind of the Napster era where everything was free. So iTunes ultimately starts to, to decrease in its popularity. And then Spotify comes along, and Spotify, from my perspective, is like Napster for $9.99 a month. And that has been working for like the last decade and continues to work, and don't think it's going to stop working for a selection of artists. But many artists on Spotify don't, aren't streaming quite well, and therefore aren't getting paid. And if your music is on a storefront and it's not getting paid, it basically feels like Napster. And that's kind of created this opportunity for music NFTs. And Spotify has like really pioneered the passive music listening. Even monthly listeners, the primary metric on any artist profile is a passive metric. It is literally anyone who listens to a song once a month. And I could check out an artist right now on a playlist. That does not mean that I'm a fan of them. And so there's a bit of missing active consumption today. And then music NFTs, which, like everybody likes to make fun of, the concept is actually quite simple. It's anyone can listen for free, but collecting or ownership is valuable to own. And I think that concept is pretty powerful, because the anyone can listen for free is very akin to like a Spotify or a Napster type, era where, you can basically listen for free. But the collecting aspect is very more like iTunes, vinyl, and like CD, but has this twist of like the social status, the scarcity, and all these little, Web3 elements, which seem kind of innocuous at the surface, but are actually quite powerful because of, the fact that like people have been running around the internet for as long as, I've been around, saying like, hey, I discovered, Drake before you, or I was here first. And that's like the primary message in any artist DMs that it's filled with, is I've been a fan of yours since 2014. And music NFTs are like a very clean, simple way to basically show you were here first, support an artist through their music, get some, like social status in return, and like really, really exciting. So that's kind of the gist of it.
If you look back 8 months ago, one of the biggest conversations was around the consumption layer of music NFTs, and there was a heavy environment around collecting, but you couldn't really consume the things that you collected. They sat in your MetaMask, right? And maybe some of these wallets had like media native players, but they sucked, to be frank. But now we're seeing products like Future Tape, who just got acquired by Zora, and Spinamp, who's rolling out and getting more and more traction, sort of like building out like the consumption layer for media, audio, video, collectibles. What are your thoughts around that? Is that net positive? Where do you see that sort of like going down the line?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is that like music has always been meant to be heard by as many people as possible, and so the more products, services, applications that are spreading music and finding ears, the better for obviously like the artist, which is at the end of the day all that matters. And so obviously what we talked about earlier, like this is something that like Spotify and kind of the DSPs kind of missed out on, was having this rich ecosystem of like third-party applications that kind of build on top of kind of the content, minting kind of catalog. And that to me is like something that is like really, really exciting to see. And so I think it's really interesting that you could have different types of listening experiences based on like whatever that product is trying to solve. And then obviously, on sound, like we're also investing a lot into like discovery as well, in terms of how do you find out about these, songs that are getting released as, there's more and more drops, even like, having 11 drops in one day, like that creates a whole different set of challenges that we didn't face. And I think that's something that like, I think is kind of the era that we're about to enter, which is like this, obviously like this, sound is kind of takes a little bit of an ode from this, but we're like about to enter the like Web3 version of the SoundCloud era, where like, artists are no longer going to stop or like no longer to have to like overthink like this whole release because of like, is it going to get playlisted or all these things, and artists are going to be free to like just release music. And we're seeing like a lot of artists make a track, mint it on the spot, and just send it. which I think is something that has like been missing from the music industry today, because there's so much paranoia around, is it going to go viral on TikTok? Is it going to get playlisted? That I think is going to take some time to get undone. But that is really what made the SoundCloud era so like exciting and interesting, was like artists were just experimenting with music, putting it out there, having no idea what was going to go viral, what was not going to go viral, and really just like putting out like incredibly exciting, music. And that's something that I think is like what's been most encouraging, is we're seeing more drops, less overthinking. I think music NFTs have like started to hopefully simplify. Like it really is just, the JPEG and the WAV file. And so not over complicating things. And, that's kind of been the formula that's been working. And a lot of the artists in the space that are having the most success are the ones that are like consistently releasing. And as there's more music being released, there should be more kind of homes to find that music. And whether that's on Sound, whether that's on, Spinamp or Future Tape, it's overall incredible for the music ecosystem, and kind of like lives to the promises of, or the Web3 kind of ideals of like not having it contained in kind of one primary kind of application.
So that brings me to a very relevant question that got asked on Twitter. For music artists looking to release on Sound, what are some potential roadmaps/strategies you're seeing working right now, and how might those strategies evolve as the platform grows?
Yeah, I literally say that there's two ingredients for like what works on Sound. One is good music. Like if the music is not great, there's nothing that's gonna help you on that front. And then two is like release consistently. And consistently, like there's not really like a strict timeline on that. Like I think like if I had to give like some very large spectrum, it's like 2 to 8 weeks, which is a very large time frame. And anybody really doing that right now is having a decent amount of success on Sound. Because truthfully, like just the act of minting alone is something I also said more recently. Like the act of minting alone is the W. Like it is the win, because the more artists that are tokenizing their works on chain, the more possibilities and the more places that can discover them, the more places that can integrate with kind of the catalog. That is already really, really exciting. And I think that's probably been one of the biggest shifts. Is obviously like Sound kind of was like very kind of like caught us by surprise, but like became very associated with like obviously selling out, because so many of the like drops in the beginning sold out and still continue to sell out. But I think that's like not something that like we're as a brand like caring as much about. Like it's really like I think the things that we want to like leverage our brand to champion are really artists putting out incredible music, connecting with their listeners in cool ways. And if it sells out, great, but I always say like you can't rug good music. Like if it's good, it will eventually find its audience. So I think that part is something that rings true for me today.
Let's pivot back to the protocol for a minute, because something that's really interesting about Sound that I feel like you've done so well, David, is create this environment of exclusivity. And with that, that's attracted a really interesting group of collectors based off how your team curates artists, sort of like drives hype and excitement around who buys what gets bought and how much gets bought and whatnot. And then you come around, you introduce the protocol, and I guess I'm trying to tap into your mind for a minute. Like, what's your strategy of releasing the protocol first before opening up the platform to more people? Like, how do you see that?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this like a little bit. Like the protocol is like in the underlying like smart contract infrastructure is like the first step to like opening up Sound, because everybody should have access to the same contracts that are powering Sound drops today. That shouldn't be like just a privilege for people on Sound. If anybody looking to do music NFTs should have like cutting edge smart contracts for being able to release songs with this, decentralized metadata that's permanent, stored on Arweave, and having like multiple mint options, the ability to do their own golden egg if they want to do so, different, minting up modules, payment modules for, integrating with things like 0x splits. We feel like those are tools that everyone should have. And, we don't like, I think I changed my Twitter thing to David is shipping. At the moment it's ready, like we launch it, we don't wait. And so that's something that like, we felt like a lot of artists would want to have access to this. And so why would we like hold this just to ourselves if like we think it's ready? And so once, we felt comfortable, we obviously wanted to put it out in the world so that people, and, whether it's like artists or developers or companies can immediately start integrating. And so the contract side, we had pretty high clarity on like how that would work and what the process is. I think in terms of why we haven't let people like just start uploading to Sound more broadly and, like basically like open source the upload tool, which is something that is kind of next in line and will happen, sooner than people think. is basically because like it comes with a much more complicated set of trade-offs, and like, on both a product side and a legal side. Product side being like, I think it's really important that people can find the music that they want to find out about. And, if there's 5,000 uploads tomorrow on Sound, I can guarantee you're not going to find out about the ones that you really care about. And so to me, that's something that's like really critical, is like, it can't, I think my dream for Sound is like, as content grows, Adam still feels like it's like a really intimate experience the way that it is today with like, the artists that you obviously are familiar with on the site. And so one is like, how do we like separate content growth from like, music discovery, which I think is really important. And then two is like the legal concerns. Like, I've never been on, the record saying anything along the lines of like, the people who make the music shouldn't get paid. Like, you obviously want all the stakeholders in a song to get paid. And so, the last thing I want to do is have somebody monetize music that doesn't actually go to the person who made that music, because that doesn't seem like what this space is about. In fact, it was all about getting artists paid. And so the main thing is like, it will happen. Like, somebody will, and this is ultimately like something that we should obviously learn from like SoundCloud, because it got them into a lot of trouble, back in the day. And they took them many years to like reform their business to like, like accommodate like that content. And so to us, it's like, we want to make sure like we have like all of our, ducks in a row before we like, jump off the cliff and, say like, let's open it up. So I think it's really just around having an actual strategy and not being reckless here, because it's much easier to like open the floodgates than it is to open it and close it back. And so that's really why it's been taking, a little bit longer. But what I always like to remind people of is like, Sound is still less than a year old. And so it just takes time to build these cool things. And, I'm usually pretty good at getting, and this is really credit to the team that works on Sound. And I'm really lucky to work with them because they're the best team ever. And so really it's like, it takes us, it's going to take a second, but we're going to get it right. So
how big is the Sound team now, actually?
we just hit 15 people, and I think like the goals. I think like we'll grow a little bit more, but like something that we've been really proud of is like keeping the team as small as possible, because really like the more autonomy and ownership each person has, and the more we can have less meetings and more shipping and getting features out there for artists. So I think that's something that we're incredibly proud of, is keeping the team as lean as possible and building an environment where everyone has ownership over the product and can release like ideas into the world. And you see something broken, go fix it. And so for a while it was like, probably when we did our last episode, it was probably like 5 to 7, or it was really small. Crazy. For a long time. And we needed a little bit of help to get these features out a little bit faster. So that's kind of the gist of it. And one of those people is somebody who goes by the name Vectorized, who kind of like authored and helped work on our smart contracts. And he actually like maintains 721A, which came out of like the Cairo Labs, which is like part of the Azuki project. And 2721A is like the main like NFT repo for from a smart contract perspective. And so having him work on the Sound protocol was something that was like a true privilege for us, because he's one of the best out there, and he's done it before. And that's part of the, I wish I could take credit, but that's part of the reason why the contracts are so optimized.
Amazing. I think one of the things that I respect about the season 4 release and the season 4 announcement was you introduced the protocol, and then you also introduced monetization around Sound, which I really thought was genuinely really wise, because there's value in being able to curate and being that brand that sort of like puts artists on the maps. And there should be a take rate, a minimal take rate that comes with that, but providing all these tools in an open source fashion that allows anybody to build upon the Sound protocol. Like the way you sort of like introduced that was really smart. I'm curious, as you're sort of like building out the Sound protocol, prior to launch, what were some of the biggest challenges in forming the protocol and putting it together? Like, did you have like a mood board sort of when you were putting together the protocol and designing it and preparing it for release? Like, walk me through that entire process.
Yeah. So first on the like 5% thing, it was actually something that was like pretty like, something that I believe from a product perspective is like, let's get the product out there to the world. Let's make it free. Let's get, adoption. Let's see, how people react. and then only turn on monetization when we feel like we're delivering enough value to the world and people are happy. Because most of the time people are, if you're delivering a service that people like, they're more than happy to pay you for it. And the only time people get upset is when you're not delivering value and taking something. And we always wanted to under promise, over deliver. And so for the first $3.5 million that Sound generated for artists, we passed 100% of it, didn't take a single penny, directly to artists, which obviously is a statement more than anything else. And then we started taking 5% on the primary, but again, that's only on the Sound website. At the protocol level, there's actually a 0% fee, and we already deployed feeless minters for people to basically build on top of. So if people want to build their own minting experience, the 5% fee is completely up to them, or they can charge their own fee if they want to. But that's only at the the essentially the UI level at Sound. As far as the mood board, we had a couple. I would say it's more principles that we had. We wanted this to be a permissionless contract factory. We wanted to make sure it was non-upgradable, so that people artists had complete creative sovereignty over their own contracts, which was something that was really, really important to us. We wanted the metadata to be permanent and decentralized, so that's why we ended up choosing Arweave. We wanted to have support our different metadata modules in terms of we have this thing called the golden egg, which is obviously very part of Sound's brand. We actually moved the golden egg calculation fully on chain, which is something that we invested some resources and time in. So the golden egg is completely not tied to the Sound backend in any way, shape, or form, which has been really, really exciting and kind of cool to kind of see. And then we have different we wanted different auction mechanics. Essentially, we have fixed auction, we have range editions, maybe in the future open editions, or whatever the again the use cases may be. It's the cool part is not having to think of all the possibilities today and knowing that we can build them in the future if as they kind of come up. So really it was about the composability, the extensibility, and the modular aspect of these Sound contracts that I think really, really got me excited. And then kind of the secret sauce was really just optimizing them to get them so cheap and efficient that you could actually afford to deploy a new contract for every single song, which obviously creates this massive amount of collections, because they're creating a collection for every single song, which obviously makes it a little bit harder to find these things on the secondary marketplace. And we can talk about a little bit about this now, but obviously launching the Sound market, which is going to be the home for discovering music NFTs, because right now OpenSea and all the secondary marketplaces are obviously incredible, but they aren't necessarily optimized for music. And even in there are other tools that people had built for deploying smart contracts, but something that at the core of Sound was always for musicians, nothing else. We're not building for other types of creators. It's really, we've been laser focused on artists. And that is true, in the product level in terms of how the pages are structured. It's true on our profile pages. It's true, on the minting experiences. But it also should be true in the secondary market. And I think, artists like to be around other artists. And so something that I think is interesting is I think OpenSea, obviously, and all the primary marketplaces have done incredible works, obviously, getting the secondary market in the first place. And one of the cool things about the market that we're launching is it aggregates liquidity across all marketplaces. So we're not
cool.
We're not you can list where we believe, again, same way with music, you can list wherever you want, list on OpenSea, list on LooksRare, wherever you want to list. But we also have Sound native listings, where you can list directly on the Sound marketplace. And the cool part is that under the hood, that's actually a Seaport kind of marketplace, which I think is really cool, which obviously is the protocol that OpenSea rolled out. And so if you list on the Sound market, there's 0% listing fee. So we're saving buyers 2.5% that OpenSea is taking on the OpenSea side, which is something that we're really excited to kind of launch in our beta phase, where we're having a 0% listing fee. And this was all kind of built with a new startup that we're friends of Sound, called FirstMate, that is kind of building marketplaces for startups. So that's something that has been a really cool partnership as well. Obviously, they're leveraging a lot of the new protocol stuff as well. So it's just been building with other builders. And
so collectors are getting their own unique marketplace for music NFTs that's sort of detached from the entire experience of OpenSea, but they can still experience the benefits of listing right across all these marketplaces, but they can take advantage of the purchasing experience on the sound marketplace.
Yeah, the sound marketplace like kind of to me offers like, two or three main value props. One is that it is incredibly painful to go find out about music NFTs on some of these larger
Right.
marketplaces. That's partially our fault because we have every single song as its own contract, and so it creates this like very large amount of like links that you would have to keep track of and follow to like find out about music NFTs. And so one is just the discovery alone, I think, is really awesome. Two is that we have like the native listing experience, which basically comes with like a 0% listing fee, and therefore it's obviously cheaper to list on the sound market. And then three, like this is like a home for like music NFTs and really just about having artists around other artists, which I think is also incredibly exciting. And obviously like there's the market is in its like beta phase, and we're looking forward to adding as many music NFTs as possible. So I think that's something that is really, really exciting, and I'm really proud to get out this week.
I think one of the coolest unlocks of the whole entire music NFT wave is the ability to collect something. I think though over time, genuinely, it's going to become a little mundane and boring. And I'm curious from your perspective, like we've tapped into the first phase, I feel like, or maybe you'd even consider it phase 0 because we're just getting started, right? Of collecting something. Where do you imagine it going from here? Like what are we missing to sort of like bring this entire experience together?
Yeah. So I think like the collecting is kind of your entry into the music NFT world.
Right.
And I actually think there's like two kind of main paths where like collecting goes. One is at the artist level. And like I think the experiences that like artists can offer their collectors are just like literally not even, I wouldn't even know if they've gotten started. Like obviously we started with like some really small ones, like you could leave a comment, the golden egg. We recently launched like exclusive listening. If you obviously like collect an artist, when the next time they upload, you can start listening to the song early, which is obviously something that like has like people already have like listening to songs early anyway. But I think like some of the other use cases that are really obvious, whether it's like the wallet to wallet messaging hasn't necessarily taken off yet. I think the like artists like enacting their collectors to like help make decisions about like future releases or future marketing strategies. I think it's going to become a lot more of like building that like ecosystem and community around. It's still incredibly painful for artists to like engage with their collectors. And so I think there's going to be a whole set of experiences that like artists use. And I think artists have also just never had the tools to know who their like individual like believers are. And that's something that I think is like just seeing the artists come up with ideas to like, to like do things with people that like basically support their music, I think is literally just getting started. And then I think there's a lot of stuff at the sound level that like collectors will be able to do in terms of like, hey, like, maybe they're able to influence like some of the curation on sound. Maybe they're able to, like become curators themselves. So I think there's a lot of stuff that like we can do with collectors that I think, we haven't necessarily like rolled out yet. Which I think is something that's really exciting. So I think collecting is definitely like the entry point into the like music NFT world, but there will be other ways to kind of start to participate and that don't necessarily like involve collecting. So I think that's all for now.
Okay, makes sense. I want to also again pivot because all these sound protocol discussions are introducing sort of like side branches to talk about, but with introducing a protocol is with the hopes of sort of attracting a thriving developer community to build on top of it, right? I'm curious, like, how do you build a sustainable developer ecosystem and find developers who want to sort of like build towards this Web3 music vision? And then how do you sustain those people? Like, will Sound have some type of like grant program? Will I start seeing you guys at like DevCon? What do you see from your perspective of sort of like taking the protocol to the next level?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not just the protocol, but like we also launched, which I probably should have said, like we launched an SDK and like a sound API. So basically, like a full set of tools to help developers engage with the content on Sound to make it as easy as possible. I think what attracts developers is obviously like making that data as accessible as possible, and then obviously like as easy to build on top of, and then as rich, like having really like a complete set of information. And as long as that's true, like people will start to kind of build these experiences on top of it, because there's such a like kind of natural overlap between like the developer community and kind of music, and so many applications that people wanted to build but it's not necessarily have built. And I think the main thing that like attracts developers is just showing that you like want them to build on top of it, and leading kind of with actions and supporting those projects. So even today, like like having the three main music listener streaming players like Spinamp and Future Tape and Ooh La La, like that's incredible for the ecosystem. Seeing Bonfire recently integrate has been really exciting. There's some other ones that I can't disclose yet that are coming out that are big. That are starting to integrate, even this like First Made integration for the marketplace. There's just been so many really cool and exciting things that it's really just about showing concrete examples and making it less about some mythology that you can integrate with the sound protocol, and more about showing example apps that people can actually like relate to. And so I think that's why even when we launched the protocol, it was very important to us that we had a concrete example of like what you can do, so that people can very tangibly understand. And the Rio thing, they may not understand the sound protocol or all the things that kind of come with it in the beginning, but that people can understand Rio dropping an album on his own website, it's showing up on Sound, doing a really cool bespoke experience. And that's why we kind of paired it. I thought it was like the perfect example to kind of pair it with, and Rio's was the perfect partner, because anybody who knows Rio knows how awesome he is, to kind of launch this with. So
I want to also talk to you before we wrap up about like macro current events that sort of took place. So Warner and OpenSea sort of did a partnership to bring more of their artists into the space. We saw a couple major record labels introduce their own, like, I guess one sort of actually comes to mind. I forgot who, but you might know off the top of your head, but they introduced like a music NFT fund of some sort, right? All these sort of like more big picture initiatives. So us DGen sort of like made enough noise, even though I feel like I played a very small part with collecting. Platforms like yours brought a lot of the scene to life, right? And all the other collectors that sort of like came through that Billboard's article of saying like Daniel Allen is on the verge of becoming like Web3's breakout artist. Like all these headlines, all these interesting initiatives and activities sort of spurred external movement in behavior. How do you feel about that? Are we for that? Are we against that? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, so on the one hand, I'm like, the more music NFT activity, the better for kind of pioneering this as like an emerging technology within the music space. On the other hand, like it's like just a completely different field to kind of where we're at. Like I think Sound and a lot of the native Web3 ecosystem is really focused on championing the independent up and coming artists, the artists that like have been overlooked by things like Spotify. And I think in general, like it's really hard to like build that community around something like a major corporation or a major label, to kind of win over. Like it's just not like a lot of the principles are like fast transparency and accuracy, and I think it's like really cool, and I think should be encouraged, and I actually give them a lot of credit for like even wanting to experiment in the first place, because they don't have to, they make a lot of money as is. But I think in terms of like becoming the de facto solution for where music is going to be discovered, it's just completely like I wouldn't say like it's occupying too much mind share for me right now. So I think really it's about supporting the current ecosystem, and building like the true music NFT community, which I think is like really started to take shape in terms of something that is another signal to me, is just seeing all the artists collaborate with each other, making music, putting it out together across, not just Sound, but other platforms. It's been really cool to see. I think companies are collaborating with each other. I think artists are collaborating with each other. And every week it feels like, the movement is growing a little bit more, and you're seeing an artist friend come check out, the Web3 space, and word kind of spreads. And so I think that's one thing that has remained true since our last episode, is like Sound has still never spent a penny on marketing. It's fully organic. We still really don't have a way to sign up for like emails or anything on Sound, which is a terrible idea that we should probably figure out. But it's been fully organic, and it's really like the artists who deserve all the credit for it, because it's really artists championing kind of like what's been going on, telling their friends and their peers, and making music with each other. And I think collaboration is actually one of the ways that you solve education and you solve onboarding, because artists start like they might throw their collaborator on a split who doesn't even know about music NFTs, but now they have to come claim the ETH that gets generated from the sale. Now all of a sudden they have like a wallet, and they're curious, and then they want to put out their own song, and it creates that kind of flywheel effect. So I think we're just we're just getting started.
Yeah, Black Dave said this best when we recorded an episode. He's like, I think when you look at more mainstream artists trying to make their way into Web3, a lot of them fail because they don't embrace the element of collaboration. They sort of come in with their status of being up here, and us Web3 people were maybe like down here, but soon to be up here. But then he referenced Snoop Dogg as the example of like his entrance into Web3. He did have a lot of experimentation, but one thing that he did really right was sort of like call out a lot of like the up and coming Web3 artists, do a song with them, right? And then eventually release that on Sound. And he got a lot of like the Web3 music clout, despite how much of an icon he is already to begin with, right? But sort of like his entire entrance into Web3 was felt organic, felt aligned with the community, which I really respect. And I'm curious from your perspective, like if you were to say anything to these Web2 artists coming into Web3, right, that have done really well for themselves, have built listenership, they want to experiment with the Web3 route, what is that entrance? Like, what does that look like? So we talked about collaboration, looking at one of them. Do you have like a playbook, a roadmap that you could maybe share? What are your thoughts?
It's still the same advice that I give like even artists in the space that are more native. It's put out good music and release consistently. Like I think like just the act of tokenizing your music is already the sign that like, hey, you're taking this space seriously. And the reason why I say release consistently is, if you put out music or you mint an music NFT one time and then you disappear for 6 months, it's pretty hard to convince people that you're like genuinely serious about the space. It can come across like, hey, like maybe you're just in this for the money. But when you release consistently, it kind of shows that you're like somewhat committed to like tokenizing your music. And then I think like a third, but I wouldn't say like mandatory, but I think really cool gesture is people who like set aside a certain percentage of their earnings to like start collecting other artists in the space. Because I think, if you show up for others, they'll show up for you. And I think it's kind of like, it's less of like a take mentality and more of like a, give mentality. And so the more you give, the more you'll get in return. And I think some of the really exciting artists that have come into the space and done really well, they're not just like releasing consistently or putting out incredible music. They're also supporting a lot of the artists that were like there before them that they also genuinely appreciate. I think the one thing is like, I don't think you should be collecting for the sake of collecting. I think you should be collecting people that genuinely inspire you. And that's something that I think has been really, really cool. And that's how like friendships start to form and collaboration starts to form. And they might go from collecting somebody's work to doing a Twitter space with them to then putting out a song with them. And that's something that I think is a pretty repeatable blueprint in strategy.
What are some things that you've collected recently that you've sort of like really fallen in love with?
I'm saying neutral on this one because I think I don't play favorites. Any artist on Sound is like putting out incredible music. So I let you guys on the collecting side do that for me.
So does that mean you have an Anon wallet that just like collects very discreetly?
If you can find it, go ahead.
Ooh,
But
okay.
I'm pretty like I stay kind of neutral on this one, mainly because I think the main thing is like just putting out the music alone and minting it is, as I said, the win. And I think it's really like there's so much good music. It's overwhelming. Like, I mean, looking at one of the days, I would have said like that could be our whole month's worth of music, like a couple months ago. And so just seeing how much incredible music is being released, and even like the artists themselves are like getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and just building a community around their music. And it's been just insane to see the growth that people have taken over the last couple months.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're talking months, right? So like give people a year or 2 years and like, let's see what happens. And I really do feel like we're on the, precipice of like something very major happening in the next 3 to 6 months. And I think we'll get all those things that people have been clamoring for, like the first breakout song, the first breakout artist. And there's so many talented artists in the space. It's just a natural reaction of what happens when you like put talented artists together.
2 questions left for you. Okay. The first one is, how do you feel about secondaries for music NFTs? Are you a fan of collectors selling and reselling the things that they mint? We'll start there and then I'll ask the next one.
Yeah, I mean, so this isn't not necessarily tied to music NFTs. It's more broadly. I think the one thing weird about secondary sales is like you're kind of like rewarding people for exiting the community. And like, like if you have a lot of secondary volume, that means people are trading these things back and forth, versus in theory, you kind of want to reward people who like hold forever. So I think as long as the value that's being created is generating back to the artist, and there's obviously been a lot of famous royalty debates more recently, I think like I'm okay with like secondary volume. It's an additional source of revenue for artists. I don't think it's like, I think it's like important to that, like, like these music NFTs are viewed as valuable and obviously go up in value over time, which I think has been the case for the majority of the NFTs on Sound. But I don't think it's like I have kind of like a, I think the secondary marketplace is like barely even gotten started. Like it's Sound is actually about to cross like 5 million in secondary volume, which is not trivial, and that's obviously like an extra 500K that's been paid out to artists. So I think to that extent it's pretty powerful. And I think once you build the tools for more discovery, you build things like Sound Market. Yeah, like the secondary market is going to be as kind of powerful as the primary one.
Wait, so quick tangent. Wouldn't you say there's other ways to sort of like solidify one's participation in an artist? So does them selling the NFT sort of indicate their loss of love for that artist? Or is it maybe them just tapping into the economics of the beauty of having like an open market and everything being tokenized and being able to sort of like profiteer if there is room for that?
Yeah, I don't think like artists would even care if like their fans necessarily sold, if it's like them obviously like having some type of economic empowerment. Like if you can come in and support an artist through their music and then, that support ends up being worth something, there's nothing wrong with obviously like, taking that, especially like because a lot of people who made money on Sound have like taken it and just reinvested it into collecting more artists. So I think it's like I think, in general, I like believe artists should be able to put out whatever music they want. I think collectors should be able to sell and buy whatever they want. I don't believe that there should be like constructs or rules around like what's acceptable behavior. I think we should like adhere to like the Web3 ideals and like free market economics and just see where things go. But I think for people who like really have an emotional connection with that song, they're going to continue to hold the music NFT. And, I think that's all that matters.
And my last question for you, because we're just getting started, what's next for Sound? What can we expect? So last one that we did was in April or May. It's been about like 6-7 months, I guess, since we did this interview. We're obviously going to do another one in a few months to do another recap. What can we expect in the next few months? We talked a little bit about the marketplace, the protocol introduction, but yeah, from your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I threw out all my bullets. Like, we did the protocol. We launched our new song page. We obviously have this like market coming out, which is like a bit of a surprise. I think the next step, I'm going to stay pretty quiet on the product level because there's some cool things coming. But what I will say is that the goal is obviously to like get Sound open in the next couple months. And my hope is by the next time we record our part 3 is that we're talking about obviously like the Sound, like the final piece, the final half is like the UI is fully open and that people can take advantage. Our upload tool is open source. So people can kind of, mint music NFTs and have access to the contracts, at the UI level, and host their own drop parties and their own listening experiences and own golden eggs and all this other fun stuff. So I think that's really when the fun and the chaos begins. And I think that's something that I'm really like, I think is going to be the next chapter of music NFTs is on the artist side. You're going to have artists, like kind of releasing as they make songs and, kind of bring back that SoundCloud era. And then on the collector side, it's actually going to become a game of who's first to discover new music. I think today the ecosystem is so small that if you really want to, like, you can essentially collect every single, artist on Sound. And, I think a few people have gotten really close to doing so. But I think the game gets a little bit more interesting when like there's so much music being released. You actually have to like, use your taste or your judgment to actually like choose which ones you want to collect. Mm-hmm. And that actually makes like you supporting an artist actually even more valuable because now all of a sudden like your taste is like a curator or a tastemaker actually like means something today. I think it's hard for me to like get behind if you collect every single artist. That means like essentially you're, like the best curator, right? But I do think that if, there's 1,000 artists on Sound and you collect the 10 that have done the best, that does technically start to mean like, hey, like, you might know, like you might be able to predict the next one, and I think that's really where the game is headed. So I think there's a lot of fun stuff, and I'm sure you'll still be in the thick of it. So I look forward to that in part 3.
Amazing, David. Thank you so much. Before I let you go, where can we find you? Where can we find Sound? Chill it away for those who don't know.
Well, first we'll start with Sound. Sound is on Twitter at Sound.xyz _ on Instagram. It's just Sound.xyz. My personal is D Greenstein 1. You can find me with the Napster logo on Twitter. And yeah, that's pretty much it. If I'm not there, I'm probably listening to Mint. So that's kind
amazing.
of
that's what I like to hear. Oof, I'm gonna copy that one. I love it, David. Thank you so much. Till next time.
No, thank you for having me as always, Adam.